Human, there's something you should know. I'm expecting your child. You won't believe. John had always considered himself an average guy. He worked a steady job, had a small group of friends, and lived in a modest apartment in the heart of the city. Life to him was a series of small, comfortable routines. He didn't expect much to change, and honestly, he was okay with that. He enjoyed his quiet life, the predictability of each day, and the sense of normalcy that came with it. One Saturday afternoon, after finishing his shift at work, John decided to grab a cup of coffee at a local cafe. It was something he did almost every weekend, just a small way to unwind and enjoy some peace before heading back to the noise of the city. As he stepped inside, the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods filled the air, instantly relaxing him. He ordered his usual, a black coffee, and found an empty table by the window. From there, he could watch the world go by, feeling a sense of contentment in the simplicity of it all. That's when he saw her. She walked in, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She had a smile that seemed to light up the room, even though it was early in the afternoon and the cafe was fairly quiet. She moved with a grace that immediately caught John's attention, her presence almost magnetic. He couldn't help but notice how she scanned the room, looking for a place to sit. Her eyes met his for just a brief moment, and something in that fleeting glance made his heart race. He quickly looked away, not sure why he felt this sudden rush of nervous energy. John tried to shake off the feeling, but as he sipped his coffee, he found himself glancing at her again. This time, she was walking toward the counter to place her order. He couldn't help but notice the way she carried herself, confident but not overly so. She seemed comfortable in her own skin, as if she knew exactly who she was and didn't need to impress anyone. Before he could stop himself, John found himself standing up, his legs moving on their own. He wasn't sure what was driving him, but he walked up to her with a mixture of nerves and curiosity. "Excuse me," he said, his voice sounding unsure. "I notice you don't have a seat. If you like, you can join me at my table. It's a bit crowded today." She looked at him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, without hesitation, she smiled. "That's kind of you," she said, her voice warm and inviting. "I'd love to." John gestured to his table by the window. She followed him, and as they both sat down, he felt an odd sense of relief. It was as if he'd known her for longer than just a few seconds, and he couldn't help but feel an immediate connection. "So, what brings you to this part of town?" John asked, trying to make small talk. He wasn't great at starting conversations, but something about her made him want to try. "I'm just here visiting some friends," she replied. "I don't usually come to this cafe, but I heard it was good, so I thought I'd check it out." John smiled. "It's one of my favorites. I come here every weekend. The coffee's great, and it's usually pretty quiet, which I like." She nodded, glancing around the cafe before meeting his eyes. "I can tell. It's peaceful here." War. About everything and nothing. They discussed the weather, their favorite foods, and their hobbies. As the conversation flowed, John found himself laughing more than he had in a long time. There was something about her presence that put him at ease, and he found himself sharing things he hadn't told anyone in years. She listened attentively, her eyes never leaving his as he spoke. It was as if she was truly interested in what he had to say, and that made him feel special in a way he hadn't experienced before. When the conversation slowed down, Emily, as she introduced herself, asked him about his job. John hesitated for a moment before explaining that he worked in a small office doing marketing. It wasn't the most exciting job in the world, but it paid the bills and gave him the security he needed. Emily smiled at him, her eyes softening. "You seem like someone who values stability," she said thoughtfully. "But I'm sure there's more to you than just your job." John chuckled, a little embarrassed. I suppose so. I don't really seek out excitement. I'm content with my life as it is. She raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. And what if I told you that sometimes life has a way of throwing unexpected things your way, things you never saw coming? John looked at her, feeling a bit puzzled. I guess I'd say that's true, but I like things predictable. I don't mind the ordinary. Emily smiled, but there was something almost mysterious about it. She didn't respond right away, instead, taking a sip of her coffee. John couldn't help but wonder if there was more to her than she was letting on. There was a certain depth in her eyes, a kind of quiet wisdom, and it made him want to know more about her. But before he could ask anything, she stood up, her smile returning. I have to go, she said, but it was really nice talking to you, John. Maybe we can do this again sometime? John nodded, feeling a little disappointed that their time together was ending so soon. I'd like that. As she walked out of the cafe, John found himself staring after her, wondering if he'd have ever see her again. He didn't know why, but something about her felt different. It wasn't just the way she looked or the way she spoke, it was the way she made him feel. It was as if he had known her far longer than just a few minutes, and he couldn't shake the feeling that their paths had crossed for a reason. The next few days passed like they always did, with John going to work, running errands, and keeping to his usual routine. But Emily stayed on his mind. Every time he passed the cafe, he found himself hoping she would be there, just as he had hoped the first time they met, but she never was. He told himself that it was probably just a fleeting connection, something that wasn't meant to last. After all, people came and went in his life all the time. That was just the way it worked. But deep down, John couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He missed the conversation they had, the way she listened to him, and the way she made him feel understood. For the first time in a long time, he found himself longing for something more than the ordinary life he had always lived. Then one day, a message appeared on his phone. It was from Emily Arb. Hey John, it read, I know it's been a little while, but I wanted to reach out. I have been thinking about our conversation and I'd love to meet up again. What do you think? John's heart skipped a beat. He quickly typed out a response, his fingers shaking slightly. I'd love to, he replied. When are you free? And just like that, their story began. Little did John know this was only the beginning of an adventure that would change his life forever. A few days after their first meeting, John's mind was still preoccupied with thoughts of Emily. He found himself glancing at his phone every so often, wondering if she would reach out again. When her message came through, his heart skipped a beat. He quickly replied, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. They arranged to meet at the same cafe where they first met. It felt like fate was at play, as if their connection was something beyond a simple coincidence. When John arrived, Emily was already sitting at their usual table by the window. She smiled when she saw him, and for a moment the world seemed to fade around them. It was a simple gesture, but it made John feel like the most important person in the room. He sat down across from her, and the familiar comfort of her presence made him relax. There was a quiet tension in the air, though, as if something significant was about to happen. Hey, John, Emily began, her voice softer than usual. There's something I need to tell you. The tone in her voice was different, and he could sense that whatever she was about to say was important. He leaned forward, his hands clasped together on the table, waiting for her to continue. I've been thinking a lot about us, Emily said, her eyes searching his face, about everything that's happened between us. And I think I owe you the truth. John raised an eyebrow, unsure of what she meant. What do you mean? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Emily took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving his. She seemed to be weighing her words carefully, choosing the right moment to say what was on her mind. The seconds felt like hours, and John could feel the anticipation building within him. Finally, she spoke. I'm expecting your child. John blinked, unable to process what she had just said. The words hung in the air, echoing in his mind, but it felt like they didn't quite make sense. He looked at Emily, searching for some sign that she was joking, but her expression was serious, her face pale. I don't understand, John stammered. How is that even possible? We've only known each other for a few weeks. Emily nodded slowly, her hands resting on the table. I know, it's crazy, but I've known for a while now. I've been trying to find the right time to tell you, but it's hard. I didn't know how you would react, and I didn't want to scare you off. John's mind was spinning. He couldn't wrap his head around what she was saying. They had only just started getting to know each other, and now she was telling him she was pregnant with his child. It didn't seem real. The idea of fatherhood felt so far away from his life, and he wasn't sure he was ready for it. He had always been content with his quiet, predictable routine, and now everything was being turned upside down. You're sure it's mine? He asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and fear. Emily's gaze softened. Yes, John, I am sure. I wouldn't be telling you this if I wasn't. I've known for a few weeks now, but I needed time to process everything myself. I wasn't sure how to tell you. John swallowed hard, trying to make sense of the situation. He had never imagined his life would take this turn. He had always thought he would have more time before making big decisions. Now, here he was, facing something that seemed too big for him to handle. The responsibility of fatherhood weighed on him, and he felt a wave of panic wash over him. I don't know what to say, John murmured, his mind racing. I wasn't planning on this. I don't even know if I'm ready to be a father. Emily reached across the table, her hand gently resting on his. I understand, she said quietly. I am scared too. This wasn't how I imagined things going, but I don't want you to feel like you're alone in this. We can figure it out together. Her words were comforting, but John still felt the weight of the situation. He had always prided himself on being in control, but now it felt like everything was slipping through his fingers. How could he be a father when he wasn't even sure what he wanted for his own life? Could he really handle the responsibility of a child? I don't know if I can do this, John admitted, his voice trembling slightly. I don't know if I'm cut out for it. Emily squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with understanding. You don't have to have all the answers right now. We'll take it one step at a time. It's okay to be scared. I'm scared too, but I know we can figure it out together. For the first time, John allowed himself to truly look at Emily. Her eyes were full of sincerity, and he could see the vulnerability in her expression. She wasn't asking him to have all the answers, or she wasn't asking for perfection. She was simply asking for him to be there with her as they navigated this uncertain path. As the reality of the situation began to settle in, John realized that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. But one thing was clear, he wasn't alone. Emily was willing to face this challenge with him, and that meant more than anything else. Okay, John said finally, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. We'll figure this out together. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. John found himself unable to focus on anything other than the news Emily had shared with him. Every conversation, every moment seemed to be clouded by the overwhelming realization that his life was changing. He couldn't stop thinking about the future, about the responsibility that came with being a father. The weight of the situation pressed down on him, and he struggled to process everything that had happened. Emily, for her part, was patient with him. She didn't push him to make any decisions, and she gave him the space he needed to come to terms with the news. She continued to reach out, offering her support and reassurance, but John couldn't shake the fear that had taken root in his heart. Warm. One evening, a few days after their initial conversation, John found himself standing at his kitchen counter, staring at the phone in his hand. He had spent hours talking to Emily over the past few days, but he still hadn't told his family or friends about the pregnancy. He wasn't sure how to even begin to explain it. He had always kept his personal life private, and now he felt like he was about to share something that was too big, too overwhelming to fully comprehend. As he stood there lost in his thoughts, his phone buzzed. It was another message from Emily. I know this is a lot, but I just wanted to remind you that I'm here for you. We don't have to figure everything out right away. Take your time. John stared at the message for a moment, and for the first time in days, he felt a small sense of relief. He wasn't alone in this. Emily had been there for him, offering her support, and now it was his turn to be there for her. The fear that had gripped him began to loosen, and he realized that maybe, just maybe, he could do this. The next day, John decided to visit Emily. He knew it was time to talk things through, to figure out what the future might hold. As he drove to her apartment, his mind was still racing with questions and doubts, but one thing was clear. He was ready to face the challenge ahead. When he arrived, Emily greeted him with a warm smile, and for the first time, John felt a glimmer of hope. They sat down together and began to talk about the baby, about their fears, about their dreams. It wasn't easy, but as they spoke, John realized that they were both in this together. It wasn't going to be perfect, but they had each other, and that for now was enough. The days after that conversation were a blur of emotions for John. It was as though his world had been flipped upside down. He had always considered himself someone who valued predictability, routine, and a quiet life. But now, the news of a child on the way was forcing him to confront a reality that seemed entirely foreign to him. He wasn't sure how to feel, and every time he tried to sort through his emotions, a wave of uncertainty came crashing down. But slowly, things started to settle. Emily remained calm, a steady presence in the midst of his inner turmoil. She never pushed him to make any immediate decisions, giving him space to think, to process, and to come to terms with what was happening. It wasn't easy for either of them. John still found himself questioning whether he was ready to take on the responsibilities of fatherhood, but the more time he spent with Emily, the more he realized that he wasn't alone in this. They were in this together. John spent his days at work, but his mind constantly wandered back to thoughts of Emily and the future. He found himself daydreaming about the baby, imagining what it would be like to be a father. It wasn't something he had ever considered before, but now it felt as if the pieces of his life were beginning to fall into place, even if it was in a way he never expected. One evening after a long day at work, John found himself walking to Emily's apartment. It had become their routine. He would visit her after work and they would talk about everything and nothing, but today felt different. He had been thinking about their future together, and for the first time, he felt a sense of excitement mixed with the nerves. He had been holding on to so much fear, but now he was ready to embrace what was coming, ready to face it head on. When he arrived, Emily greeted him with a smile. She looked just as beautiful as the first time he had seen her warmth and kindness radiating from her. As they sat down together, John took a deep breath. He knew what he had to say, and though it wasn't easy, he was ready to speak the words that had been swirling in his mind. Emily, John began, his voice steady but with a hint of vulnerability. I've been thinking a lot about us, about the baby. And I want you to know that I'm here. I'm ready for this. I don't have all the answers, and I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to try. Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion. John, I know this is a big change, and I'm scared too, but I believe in us. We'll figure it out together. John nodded, his heart swelling with a sense of gratitude. In that moment, he realized that it wasn't about having everything planned or figured out perfectly. It was about taking it one step at a time, trusting each other, and embracing the unknown together. They didn't need to have all the answers right away. Warm. What mattered was that they were willing to face the challenges ahead side by side. As the days turned into weeks, John and Emily settled into a new rhythm. The fear that had once consumed him began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination. Emily continued to support him, showing him what it meant to be strong in the face of uncertainty. And as the baby grew inside her, so did their bond. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments when John felt overwhelmed, but he knew he wasn't alone. They were building something together, something that would change their life in ways they couldn't yet imagine. One evening, after a long day, Emily asked John to come with her to her doctor's appointment. It wasn't the first time he had been to one, but this time felt different. There was something about the way Emily had asked him that made John realize how much she needed him there. He agreed without hesitation. Sitting in the waiting room together, John watched Emily as she nervously tapped her fingers on the armrest. He could tell she was anxious, and a part of him wanted to reassure her, but he didn't know what to say. Instead, he reached over and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. Emily looked at him, her expression softening. I'm glad you are here, she said quietly. John smiled, feeling a sense of warmth spread through him. I wouldn't be anywhere else. When they were called into the examination room, Emily's doctor greeted them with a warm smile. John had met the doctor a few times before, but today he felt a deeper sense of connection. The doctor explained the next steps, asked about any concerns, and made sure Emily was comfortable. As the appointment continued, John listened carefully. His thoughts focused on the baby, on the future, and on how his life had shifted in ways he had never imagined. After the appointment, as they walked out of the clinic, Emily turned to John with a smile. We're one step closer, she said softly. John nodded, feeling a sense of pride in his chest. For the first time in weeks, he felt a clear sense of purpose. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about them, about the life they were about to create together. He didn't know all the answers, but he knew one thing for certain. He was ready to face it, ready to embrace the unknown as long as they were together. In the weeks that followed, John and Emily continued to prepare for the arrival of their baby. They spent hours talking about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, and about the life they wanted to build together. It wasn't easy, but it was real. They were no longer living in the comfortable predictability of the past. They were stepping into a new chapter, one that was full of uncertainty but also full of promise. John spent his evenings helping Emily prepare the nursery, picking out baby clothes, and learning about the things he never thought he would need to know. At times, he still felt unsure about what the future would hold, but he was no longer afraid. He had Emily by his side, and together they could face anything. As the months passed, Emily's pregnancy progressed, and the day of the baby's arrival grew closer. John could feel the anticipation building, and while there were moments of anxiety, there were also moments of joy and excitement. The couple shared late night talks about their hopes for their child, their dreams of the future, and the life they wanted to build. John realized that this child was already shaping their world in ways he hadn't anticipated, bringing them closer together and giving them a reason to keep moving forward. Finally, the day came. Emily went into labor and John was there by her side every step of the way. It wasn't easy, but together they faced the challenges of childbirth, supporting each other through the pain and uncertainty. When their baby finally arrived, John held the tiny little one in his arm, feeling a wave of love and awe that he couldn't put into words. As he looked at his child, he realized that everything had changed. His life was no longer defined by the quiet routine he once clung to. It was now defined by the love he had for Emily, for this new little life they had created together, and for the future they would build as a family. John had never imagined that he would become a father so soon, but now, with his child in his arms, he knew that this was exactly where he was meant to be. It wasn't going to be easy, and the road ahead would have its challenges. But together, with Emily by his side, he knew they would face whatever came their way, ready to embrace the journey of parenthood together.